So I'm sure you're all aware of the Philips CDI. It might be the most infamous piece of gaming hardware ever created. By far, most of the infamy boils down to 4 mediocre games featuring famous Nintendo characters and a lot of goofy cutscenes. As much as I'd love to beat these dead horses further into the ground, there's really nothing I could say that hasn't already been said. The games aren't great, helped in no way by the CDI's 2-button control scheme and underpowered CPU even for the time, but you know, had they not been attached to 2 incredibly successful and enduring franchises, I doubt they'd even be a footnote in gaming history. YouTubers might even be calling them hidden gems for their pretty decent graphics and sound. But alas, instead these games have given the CDI a reputation as one of the worst video game consoles of all time, which is not entirely undeserved, but here's the thing, it wasn't originally supposed to be a video game console at all.
This may look like an ordinary compact disc, but actually it's an interactive encyclopedia.
Early on, Philips avoided even associating the CDI with video games. This wasn't a kid's toy like a Sega or a Nintendo. This was the real deal, entertaining the whole family, or teaching you about the world through interactive encyclopedias, museum tours, and Sesame Street. This kind of software had become somewhat popular on PCs prior to the internet, but PCs were expensive, so the idea was the CDI could provide all of that same stuff at a much cheaper price point. In practice, rather than filling a niche, the CDI was more like an awkward middle ground. It was more expensive than a VCR and a game console combined. It was cheaper than a computer, sure, but a computer also did a lot more, and it's not like the CDI was that cheap. So if you're gonna spend a bunch of money on anything, you might as well buy the computer. Had the CDI come out when originally planned in the mid to late 80s, it may have actually been revolutionary. Instead, it took several long years until players finally arrived on the market at the end of 1991, and by that point its specs failed to impress. About the only edge the CDI had over its competitors was FMV. If you had the optional add-on, the CDI boasted some of the best video quality of any home system at the time, eclipsing even later systems like 3DO and PS1. But since most people didn't have it, the best they could hope to see was crude animations like these.
How about a kiss? For luck?
You've got to be kidding.
It didn't matter anyway, since FMVs likewise never gained a ton of momentum, but without it there was really nothing that the CDI offered over its competitors. In desperation, Philips eventually did pivot to marketing the CDI as a game console proper, having realized that despite their plans, games had still managed to become the most popular software on the platform. But this was 1994, and there was no way any gamer was taking the CDI seriously with the PlayStation right on the horizon. As was the case for much of the CDI's lifespan, it was all too little too late, and spent the rest of the 90s quietly dying a slow death. Today, Philips has largely abandoned consumer electronics, instead finding a small but lucrative niche in health technology. And while their decline in consumer electronics can't be solely blamed on the CDI, losing hundreds of millions of dollars trying to launch something that never took off surely didn't help. I've always been fascinated by underdogs, and over the years I've amassed a pretty stupid collection of CDI hardware. See, the CDI wasn't just one console. It was a standard, just like an audio CD or DVD movie. As such, a lot of companies bought in and created their own versions of the CDI player. One of the most interesting being Sony's Intelligent Discman. That's right, a way to play CDI media on the go. I don't own one of those, but I do own one of these, which looks straight up like an old 486 PC. It has a floppy drive, which allows you to copy files to and from the CDI. It also has a bunch of I/O on the back that can be used to connect to generic devices or other CDIs. Apparently the idea is that you could have a classroom full of these things that are all networked with one central system operated by the teacher. That's pretty cool, and there's probably a whole video I could make about this thing. But again, for the time, it was nothing particularly special if you already had access to PCs. Then there's this thing, possibly one of the most obscure pieces of hardware I own. It was manufactured by LG, apparently, and distributed by a company I've never heard of. And then in Saudi Arabia it was distributed by yet another company I've never heard of. Apparently these were released in 1998 and sold well into the early 2000s, making them one of the last bastions of the CDI legacy. It also doesn't currently work. The power switch is broken, meaning you have to manually hold it in to keep it on, and then there's something wrong with the drive tray where it refuses to stay closed. This too probably deserves a video of its own one day. But speaking of hardware, even if you have a CDI, or several, you may still have no actual game controllers. Like I said, the CDI had many intended uses, but most of them weren't gaming, making the few controllers that were made surprisingly rare and today pretty expensive. All I got with mine was an infrared remote and the infamous spoon, neither of which are going to be great for games requiring any kind of action. So I finally decided to take matters into my own hands and build an adapter so I could use a controller I actually do own. I figured the Sega Genesis controller made sense since they actually pretty closely resemble one of the CDI's official game controllers. Plus they're cheap, plentiful, and in fact still being made today, and I have plenty of them already lying around. I built a prototype out of an Arduino, which a friend of mine lovingly called a fire hazard. So I did it properly. I compacted all those thick, juicy wires into a PCB. I designed and 3D printed a case to put it all in, and it looks pretty good if I do say so myself. If you want to hear more about converting Genesis controller signals into CDI controller signals, check out this members-only video where I get all into it. Link on screen and in the description. Of course, I have to shout out the company that not only turned my PCB design into a reality, but also sponsored this video. Who else? It's PCBWay. Now, I've been working with these guys for years and they've never failed me. Whether it's simple stuff like the CDI adapter or much more complicated stuff like an OG Xbox mod chip, they've always managed to turn my harebrained schemes into something that looks legit. Look at this. Now this is much cleaner. To think, all those messy wires are now just embedded straight into the board. If you're ever in need of a PCB, check them out at PCBWay.com, where you can get a quote absolutely free. They even offer a complete board assembly and 3D printing service, so if there was ever a huge amount of demand for these things, I could have them do pretty much all of the manufacturing for me. But since this is the CDI we're talking about here, I don't think that'll be necessary. Anyways, we're not actually here to talk about any of that stuff in this video. We're here to talk about these. These are CDI 450s released in 1994. These were Philips' last-ditch effort to make the CDI relevant, positioning it as a relatively affordable CD-based game system along the lines of the Sega CD and 3DO. I guess the plan worked a little. I mean, these do seem to be the CDIs that sold the best. They also received numerous rebrandings from companies like Gold Star, High Screen, Mana Space, and of course in North America they were branded under Magnavox, which Philips owned at this point. I actually have one of each, a US Magnavox model and a European Philips model. To be totally honest, even CDI fans don't love these things. Their cheapness has made them the least collectible and one of the least reliable CDIs out there. At least these are the ones I most frequently hear about having issues. So how bad could these ones be? The Philips one actually works reasonably well. Games load perfectly fine, though occasionally it would run into some trouble, resulting in cutscenes ending prematurely and some amusing audio skipping in the menus. Oh! Uh-oh! I suspect with a little cleaning and lubrication on the CD drive, everything would be fine. The Magnavox one is clearly yellower and has a crack in the case. Not a huge deal, but something I'll definitely want to fix later on. It's also got this interesting sticker. Property of Sears, Roebuck & Co. More importantly, does it work? Well, if we wait for the monitor to warm up, it does power on. However, it says disk, even though there is no disk. It can detect the lid opening and closing, but even when I put a CD in, it still just sits there saying disk. If I leave the lid open and push the sensor down manually, the disk doesn't even seem to spin. Though the laser does pulse, so it's not completely dead. Oh yeah, and the CDI predates CD burners, so it has no copy protection. Burned disks should just work. Perhaps even more concerning is that the BIOS itself is kinda glitchy. Occasionally it'll boot up and say the memory is full, with either junk entries that I have to delete before it'll proceed, or nothing at all. Now, ordinarily a corrupted BIOS would be really concerning, but it turns out this is actually a very common and well understood fault of this CDI model. Back then, flash memory was really expensive. More expensive than RAM, which is hard to imagine today. So to save costs, a lot of systems would store permanent data in RAM. And to prevent the data from disappearing once the system was powered off, they would keep the RAM perpetually powered with some kind of battery. The thing about batteries is they tend to run out after 30 years or so. So the CDI's memory not only can't permanently store things anymore, but it also occasionally picks up random garbage data, resulting in glitches like the phantom memory data and bizarre values in the system clock like January 0th, 1989. Supposedly, in rare cases, it can even stop disks from loading. Could this be the root cause preventing this CDI from achieving greatness? Well, sounds like all we need to do is replace the battery, right? You would think so, right? Well, you can take a look at the motherboard and there's no battery in sight, nor is there an Xbox-style clock capacitor either. Instead, the battery is embedded in this chip right here, known as the timekeeper. It's an all-in-one solution containing a clock, RAM, and battery to keep it all running, which Philips has helpfully soldered straight to the board. You might be wondering, well then, how the hell do we replace the battery? Yep, you can't. Philips really provided no official way to change the battery if it died. To be fair, the battery is supposedly rated for at least 10 years, depending on how much time the system has been left unplugged for. Theoretically, if you had yours hooked up for all 30 years since you got it, your timekeeper would probably still be tip-top. But if it isn't and you need to replace it, you basically have two options. Option 1, desolder the entire chip and replace it with another, preferably with a socket, so the next time you have to replace it, it isn't such a pain. The other option is to replace only the battery portion of this chip. Now, how do you do that? Well, there's no other word for it, you literally slice the fucker open. I'm dead serious. There are a lot of different approaches to this. Some people slice just enough to access the wires going to the battery so they can solder in a new one in parallel. Some people gouge out the whole battery, and some people remove the whole top half. This might sound dangerous and barbaric, but it's actually a lot more doable than you think. It turns out the chip is split into two halves. The bottom half contains all of the main electronics, while the top half contains nothing more than a battery and a clock resonator. So if you know that, it's actually not that risky to cut only the section containing the battery. Even so, I took one look at this and thought, what am I, some kind of animal? So I headed over to eBay and bought the cheapest set of replacements I could find. It took a few weeks, but eventually, they didn't arrive. To be honest, I'm pretty sure they were stolen. You're welcome, guys. Good luck fixing your CDI, I guess. But in all honesty, it was probably for the best. Over those weeks, I did some more research and learned that those eBay timekeepers were bad news. The last thing I wanted to do was replace a high-quality part with some cheap knockoff. But I was also wary of buying a brand new, genuine one. I mean, I guess it's not that expensive for something that lasts 10 years, but do I really want to be buying these every 10 years? I started to feel a little more open to replacing only the battery part of this chip. Not only would it save money, but if I sold it in a battery holder, then any future replacements would be as simple as popping the old battery out and sliding a new one in. So that is what I decided to do. You can really tell the CDI 450 was built for a budget when you open it up. There are only 4 screws in the whole thing, otherwise it's all just wedged together. Sadly, a different part of the plastic case just snapped off in the process. This thing has clearly become extremely brittle in its old age. But on the bright side, it looks like this one actually has a digital video cartridge. That'll be fun if I actually end up getting it to work. On the not so bright side, this thing has clearly suffered from some kind of water damage. It looks like the board was mostly protected, except for this area near the power LED. I wonder if that has anything to do with it not working right. But first, it was time to take a look at the timekeeper. This is what I was going to need to slice into, and from the side you can pretty clearly see that split chip design I was talking about. It's weird, the split almost implies that the top half should be replaceable, but no, it's epoxied on both sides. We'll need to Dremel through to take it off. I decided to remove the entire top half, thinking the end result would be a lot neater than only slicing the battery. That does mean I need a new clock resonator too, but technically those can also degrade with age, so it's not such a bad idea to replace them too. Alright, good luck, me. So, fun fact, this is my first Dremel experience, and I was too nervous to ensure either camera had a good shot of this, especially cutting so close to a battery. It wasn't so hard though. You don't have to cut through much to get it off, and the chip is mostly empty space inside, so it's fairly forgiving. With the top part removed, I was eager to see all of this working, so I hacked on a new battery holder and clock capacitor just temporarily to see if this really would work. Indeed, it did. The CDI could now keep time and store save data. I can't tell if this was surprisingly easy or surprisingly hard. Like, this is a lot just to replace a battery, but I didn't expect cutting up a chip to go so smoothly. Now, clearly this works, you could keep it like this, but it's also a bit of a mess. These components flapping around really isn't ideal. At best they'll rattle, and at worst they'll snap off. And at even worse, they'll cause some kind of short circuit and damage the board. Thankfully, I don't have to go far to find a way to tidy this up. Modder Cabri 89 designed a PCB that serves as a drop-in replacement for the top half of the timekeeper. It's basically just a board with footprints for a battery module and a clock resonator, and it fits perfectly in the place of the old cap hat, lining right up with the original connectors. I particularly like that it cleverly supports both surface mount and through-hole components. With surface mount you can make it even neater and more compact, but with through-hole it's easier to assemble. Of course I called up my boys at PCBWay again, and once again they didn't disappoint. I'm using a surface mount battery holder because there's really not a lot of clearance over the timekeeper, so I wanted something as slim as possible. I am using a through-hole clock resonator though, because they're a lot easier to find, and if I bend it down, it won't cause any issues with clearance. Attaching it to the chip was a little tricky. On one side there were still enough prongs to reach the board, but on the other side I had to use some wire. I used 22 gauge solid core wire, which will hopefully hold it in place reasonably well. And there we go, timekeeper fixed. But take a look at it with the shielding on. There's really no more vertical space left. Okay, let's all be super clear here. All of this stuff, printing a PCB, assembling a board, cutting up a chip, all of it had the net effect of replacing a battery. What would have been so hard about just letting users do that? But does it now load games? No. Turns out the timekeeper was only part of the problem. It was time to check out the CD area, and my next region of interest was this corroded area over here. I was particularly hopeful when I learned that the clock frequency printed on this oscillator, 33.8688 MHz, is specifically used in CD players. I wiped off all the gunk with alcohol, reflowed everything in the area, and even desoldered the crystal to clean it off too. I really thought this had a good chance of being the problem, but was it? No, still nothing. Now I was really invested. All the obvious culprits hadn't been it, so it was time to investigate deeper. I had to find out whether this was a problem with the board or a problem with the CD module itself. I did learn how to enter the CDI service menu, which theoretically provides diagnostics for the CD mechanism, though for some reason it only works with a CDI mouse, not a game controller. I guess I'll have to build another adapter, but before I do that, it occurred to me that I have a known working CD mechanism right here that will at least let me narrow down whether it's the board or the CD module. I'd kind of assumed it would be the board given the corrosion, but much to my surprise... well, there you go. Well, that's a pretty clear result. Turns out the board is totally fine, it must just be the CD module that's broken. Now the only question is, what to do about it? So we've established this CDI model was built for a budget, but it's not all bad. It also means Philips used quite a few standard off-the-shelf parts in its design. This drive module is called the CDM 12.1, and it was used in a ton of devices from 1994 onwards, mostly cheaper, lower-end stuff. That's not to say it's poor quality. When it works great. It's just a little bit prone to failure. But because it was so common, that means its failure points are quite well known, and cloned replacements are even still being manufactured to this day. Once upon a time, I would have jumped at buying one of these, assuming a brand new part would work like new. But if there's anything that I've learned from this project and others, it's that it's often actually better to repair an authentic original than replace it with a clone from today. Just saying, these aren't being made by Philips anymore. So I needed to narrow down what part of this module wasn't working right. Specifically, was it failing to detect a disk at all, or was the motor just failing to spin? I mean, the BIOS just said disk either way, so I really couldn't tell. I had a pretty silly idea, but it actually ended up working. The drive module has two cables, one that drives the laser and one that drives the motor. So I figured why not plug in the laser from the broken module and the motor from the working one. Theoretically, if the broken module's laser detects the disk, then the working module's motor should spin, right? Let's find out. See, that's pretty interesting. Indeed it is! The broken module was indeed able to detect a disk, and the motor from the working module started spinning. It's actually kind of cool to see that work out. So that pretty much narrows it down to the broken module's motor being the culprit. I looked up what to try for a broken CD motor and stumbled upon a page about this exact CD module saying sometimes the spindle can just get a little stuck. Maybe some dirt gets lodged in or something.
I'm gonna put some dirt in your eye.
And the solution is to poke a knife or flathead screwdriver underneath to just unstick it. Honestly, I was skeptical. I mean, the spindle didn't feel stuck to me. I could turn it freely with my fingers, no problem. But the article does indeed say, even if you can move it with your fingers, it may still be too stuck for the motor. So I thought, fuck it, can't do any harm. I poked a small flathead screwdriver underneath all the way around, thinking this isn't going to do anything. Just to find... wow. Yeah, somehow that was actually it, and the CDI now loads games. To tell you the truth, I'm stunned. I was looking for all these complicated reasons why the motor wouldn't be working when it turns out, all this time, it was just a little stuck. I can tell the drive needs a little TLC though. Its movements sound heavy, and once again we're getting some audio skipping and prematurely ending cutscenes. But in general, I was extremely happy to see all of this thing's major functionality fully restored. As for the Philips one, even though it isn't as obviously broken as the Magnavox one was, I'll probably end up doing exactly the same things on it. As we saw, it looks like its CD module could use a little TLC too, and the last time I powered it on I found it doing the same memory full thing, so it looks like it needs a new battery as well. But there's no need to repeat myself in this video, so I'll just do that off camera or maybe on a live stream at some point. I have to say, it's actually really fun working on the CDI. For such an obscure system, there's a huge wealth of knowledge and resources out there. Not just the repairs that I did, but also mods where you hex edit the BIOS to allow for a timekeeper with bigger storage, install RGB or S-video mods. It's kind of ironic, I feel like the CDI gets more modding attention than other more popular and respected consoles. I guess it's not entirely surprising, the CDI is a real nerd system. The truth is, no one's buying these just to relive the best games of their childhood. They're buying them because they're fascinating, so of course they're willing to tinker with them. And I am no different. You may have noticed I never put this thing back together, and that's because there are more mods that I want to check out, but I'm going to leave those for a future video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye guys. Don't forget, if you want to see more CDI action, and who wouldn't, check out this bonus video on how I converted a Sega Genesis controller into a CDI controller. Link on screen and in the description. And of course, special thanks to all my current members scrolling on the screen right now for keeping this whole operation afloat. Anyways, I'll see you all again real soon. Bye guys.